Christopher Nolan once again broke through the boundaries of filmmaking with his highly anticipated film, Oppenheimer. As one of the most captivating films of the present time, this movie's extensive dialogue might discourage viewers unfamiliar with this historical period. In order to better understand the plot, I have rearranged the narrative structure. The primary objective is to provide a clear overview of the entire story and its background. Once the complexity of the plot and background is understood, re-watching this film may evoke a completely different experience. In 1904, Oppenheimer was born into a wealthy Jewish family in New York. His father was a businessman, and his mother was a painter. Oppenheimer himself possessed an exceptionally high level of intelligence. By 1925, at the age of just 21, Oppenheimer had completed his graduate studies in physics at Harvard. In the same year, he transferred to Cambridge University to further pursue experimental physics research. However, Oppenheimer faced an awkward situation. Despite his exceptional analytical skills, his practical abilities were quite mediocre, particularly in conducting experimental physics. This deficiency caused great distress for Oppenheimer. Following a particularly mocking incident, Oppenheimer injected potassium cyanide into an apple, contemplating revenge against his mentor. Fortunately, he managed to regain control over himself before any drastic actions took place. It was during this time that Oppenheimer encountered a pivotal figure in his life, Niels Bohr, the renowned theoretical physicist and Nobel laureate in physics in 1922. When Bohr was giving lectures at Cambridge, he noticed Oppenheimer's adept questioning skills. Upon learning that Oppenheimer was not interested in experimental physics, Bohr decisively suggested that he shift his focus to theoretical physics. Bohr then provided Oppenheimer with a letter of introduction, leading him to the University of Göttingen in Germany, where he studied under the founder of quantum mechanics, Max Born. Oppenheimer's time at Göttingen vividly exemplified the concept of making decisions that shape one's destiny. Thriving in this environment, Oppenheimer made remarkable progress and earned his doctoral degree in physics from Göttingen in just over a year. In 1928, Oppenheimer returned to the United States after completing his studies abroad. Due to his numerous published papers, he had already gained significant renown domestically, with many universities extending offers to him. Ultimately, he chose to teach at the California Institute of Technology and the University of California, Berkeley, filling a void in the field of quantum mechanics within the American physics community. During this time, Oppenheimer became acquainted with the invention and theory of the cyclotron, led by Ernest Lawrence. During his tenure in American academia, Oppenheimer actively participated in leftist activities. Although not a member of the Communist Party himself, both his brother Frank and his wife, Catherine, were party members. Through channels associated with the American Communist Party, Oppenheimer donated a considerable amount of money to European communist parties to support their efforts during this period of agrarian reform. While his political engagement was not unusual, considering the global fight against fascism, despite not being a devout communist, he believed that radical reform was necessary in society during that era. Colleague Lawrence had advised Oppenheimer several times against engaging in leftist activities at the university, but Oppenheimer paid no heed and showed no fear. In 1938, German physicist Otto Hahn, through neutron bombardment of uranium nuclei, discovered the phenomenon of nuclear fission. Similar to cell division, nuclear fission exhibited geometric growth, triggering a chain reaction. Crucially, it released immense heat during the process. Oppenheimer instantly realized that if a sufficient quantity of uranium elements were brought together, a chain reaction of fission could unleash catastrophic energy. All signs pointed to the imminent creation of a superweapon capable of altering the course of war. The consequences of being the first to successfully develop such a weapon were unimaginable. On August 23, 1939, the Soviet Union and Germany signed a non-aggression pact. In alliance with the Soviet Union, launched an invasion of Poland, marking the outbreak of World War II. The Soviet Union's unexpected move caused Oppenheimer to lose faith in the Soviet Communist Party. It became evident that notions of maintaining neutrality were baseless. For the sake of interests, alliances could be discarded without hesitation. From then on, Oppenheimer shifted his focus away from political movements and redirected his energy towards scientific research and personal life. Oppenheimer entered into a relationship with a woman named Kitty. The crucial point was that Kitty was already married, but Oppenheimer's many talents proved irresistible, leading to her divorce from her husband and eventual marriage to Oppenheimer. Oppenheimer also involved with a lover named Joan. In fact, their relationship persisted. Oppenheimer couldn't resist his affection for Joan, only willing to engage in intimate relations with Oppenheimer without the commitment of marriage. Oppenheimer maintained an underground relationship. As World War II broke out, many physicists from Europe began to worry about the possibility of Germany developing nuclear weapons first. In response, the revered physicist Albert Einstein wrote a letter to President Roosevelt, expressing these concerns. Roosevelt took this seriously and swiftly devised a top-secret plan, codenamed the Manhattan Project, with the aim of developing an atomic bomb before Germany, with Colonel Leslie Groves as the specific leader. Groves, known for his temper, needed someone he could control when appointing a technical director for the Manhattan Project. Oppenheimer, with his political baggage, fit the bill perfectly. Despite facing staunch resistance from Groves, Oppenheimer eventually obtained security clearance and became the project manager for the Manhattan Project. From the outset, Oppenheimer believed their chances of success were slim. The United States lagged far behind Germany in progress, and they needed to quickly assemble scientists to compete with Groves's meticulous plan. Groves insisted that secrecy must be maintained, and departments should be dispersed and isolated to prevent leaks. However, Oppenheimer firmly rejected this approach, emphasizing that efficiency must be the top priority. Oppenheimer argued against this, pointing out that Germany had a genius like Heisenberg, who won a Nobel Prize at the age of 32 and was unparalleled in understanding atomic structure. Even Oppenheimer himself felt inferior in comparison. He believed that the only hope for the United States was to leverage anti-Semitic sentiments, as it would mistakenly associate Jewish scientists with their expertise. If they blinded Heisenberg with hatred and denied him sufficient research resources, there might be a slim chance of success. Oppenheimer insisted that they concentrate their research efforts and compete fiercely. Groves understood the urgency of time and reluctantly agreed to Oppenheimer's conditions. They established the atomic bomb research facility in Los Alamos, New Mexico, an isolated and scarcely populated area. The research facility operated under complete lockdown, and until the successful creation of the atomic bomb, no one was allowed to leave. Many top scientists lacked the motivation to develop weapons and were strongly averse to manufacturing them. Just like Oppenheimer's friend and the father of nuclear magnetic resonance, Isidore Isaac Rabi, said, he didn't want the physics he loved to be used for the large-scale killing of civilians. However, Oppenheimer had a firm stance on developing atomic bombs. He didn't know if humanity could control such power, but he knew that they could not allow the Nazis to develop atomic bombs first. Soon, scientists began discussing the feasibility of atomic bomb design. A physicist named Edward Teller discovered a terrifying possibility while calculating nuclear fission reactions. He found that once the first atomic bomb was detonated, the chain reaction of nuclear fission would not stop but continue indefinitely, potentially igniting the Earth's atmosphere and destroying the world. Oppenheimer, horrified by this revelation, sought Einstein's advice by making a trip to Princeton. However, Einstein, who despised mathematics, couldn't provide a solution and advised Oppenheimer to consult a professional mathematician. If nuclear weapons could indeed destroy the world, the Manhattan Project had to be terminated. Fortunately, after repeated calculations by professional mathematicians, Oppenheimer discovered that the probability of uncontrolled nuclear fission was almost zero. Although there was a possibility, it was negligible. When discussing the potential destructive power of the atomic bomb, Edward Teller once again made a surprising statement. He felt the atomic bomb's power was too small, estimating it to be only equivalent to several thousand to tens of thousands of tons of TNT explosives. He suggested working on nuclear fusion to create a hydrogen bomb, but the question was, what could generate the immense pressure needed for hydrogen atom fusion? The answer: a small atomic bomb. So, in essence, Teller's suggestion was redundant. In 1942, during the early stages of the Manhattan Project, Oppenheimer not only had to focus on the design work for the atomic bomb but also had to guard against potential espionage. An old friend, with whom he had a long-standing relationship, tried to subtly probe Oppenheimer, asking if he had any inclination to share information about the Manhattan Project with the Soviet Union. However, Oppenheimer, now entirely prioritizing U.S. interests, immediately realized the risk of treason associated with this conversation. Consequently, he promptly ended the discussion. Despite the pressure, Oppenheimer chose not to report his friend, maintaining the bonds of friendship. Feeling immense pressure, Oppenheimer, to ease his mind, met with his former lover, Joan. Oppenheimer understood the importance of finding relief from the stress induced by the project. This coping mechanism was something Oppenheimer discovered through reading psychology literature. However, after this encounter with Joan, the unexpected happened. Joan died under mysterious circumstances, ruled as suicide. The FBI had long been secretly monitoring Oppenheimer. During subsequent interrogations, Oppenheimer disclosed a friend's attempt to persuade him to betray his country. The investigators concluded that Oppenheimer maintained contact with Communist Party members but could not deny his loyalty to the country. As a result, strict surveillance continued. With the tragic death of his former lover, Oppenheimer was grief-stricken. His wife, Kitty, noticed his emotional state but displayed great understanding, urging Oppenheimer to quickly pull himself together.
You don't get to commit the sin, and then have us all feel sorry for you that it had consequences. You pull yourself together. You know, people here depend on you.
In reality, Kitty's decision to marry Oppenheimer was significantly influenced by his promising future. Under Kitty's encouragement, Oppenheimer quickly pulled himself together and immersed himself back into his work. By May 1945, the atomic bomb had not yet been successfully developed, but Hitler had already committed suicide, and Germany surrendered. Many researchers believed that there was no longer a need to continue developing the atomic bomb. However, the military was unwilling to accept that after spending over $2 billion, the project might yield no results. Oppenheimer shared this perspective, believing that while the bomb might not be necessary for immediate use, it needed to serve as a deterrent, ensuring lasting global peace and friendship. In July 1945, the prototype was finally completed, and it was decided to conduct the world's first nuclear test on July 15. Oppenheimer named this test Trinity.
Out of my heart. Three-person God. What? Trinity.
On the night of the 15th, as preparations for the nuclear test were underway, an unexpected downpour forced a postponement until the early hours of the following morning at 5:30.
Are we saying there's a chance that when we push that button, we destroy the world?
Nothing in our research over 3 years supports that conclusion, except it's the most remote possibility.
How remote?
Chances are near zero.
Near zero.
What do you want from theory alone?
Zero would be nice.
At 5:30, the nuclear test officially began. Oppenheimer paced back and forth, and the staff were tense. Everyone present was witnessing the arrival of a historic moment.
2, 1. And now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds. It worked.
Following the successful nuclear test explosion, the subsequent historical event was the dropping of 2 atomic bombs by the US on Japan. The first bomb demonstrated its devastating power. Despite the first atomic bomb being dropped on Hiroshima, it wasn't until the second atomic bomb was dropped that Japan finally capitulated, announcing unconditional surrender on August 15.
I think one of the wisest things I ever did was when I selected the director of Los Alamos.
We have spent more than $2 billion on the greatest scientific gamble in history, and we have won.
After the success of the nuclear test explosion, J. Robert Oppenheimer became a national hero, featured on the cover of Time magazine and hailed as the father of the atomic bomb. However, despite this acclaim, he couldn't find joy in his achievement. The bomb not only claimed the lives of numerous military personnel but also countless innocent civilians. Oppenheimer felt responsible for their deaths. During a meeting with President Truman, Oppenheimer expressed his inner turmoil, feeling that his hands were stained with blood. Truman, misunderstanding Oppenheimer's intentions, he believing Oppenheimer was mocking him as the one who made the decision to drop the atomic bomb. Truman promptly dismissed Oppenheimer. Despite the president's disdain, Oppenheimer remained steadfast in his belief that the development of nuclear weapons would bring unforeseen disasters to humanity. He foresaw a relentless arms race between the two superpowers, the United States and the Soviet Union, competing to create more powerful nuclear weapons. In 1947, Oppenheimer, who chose not to continue working on atomic bombs, returned to academia to resume teaching. During this period, Oppenheimer encountered an influential figure, Lewis Strauss, who served as the chairman of the Atomic Energy Commission and was both a politician and a businessman. Strauss, recognizing the commercial value of Oppenheimer's status as the father of the atomic bomb, offered him high-paying positions as the director of the Institute for Advanced Study at Princeton and as an advisor to the Atomic Energy Commission. Oppenheimer accepted these roles, not swayed by Strauss's conditions but because they allowed him to work alongside Einstein. Strauss, unaware of their prior acquaintance, suggested introducing Oppenheimer to Einstein. However, when they met, Oppenheimer and Einstein engaged in a lively conversation without paying much attention to Strauss. Oppenheimer maintained a condescending attitude toward Strauss, which greatly irked the latter. Strauss felt that these scientists looked down on his academic background. In a subsequent congressional hearing, Strauss, serving as the chairman of the Atomic Energy Commission, proposed a ban on exporting isotopes to prevent enemy nations from developing nuclear weapons. Oppenheimer, known for his candor, immediately expressed his views. The remark elicited laughter from the audience.
Congressman, you could use a shovel in making atomic weapons. In fact, you do. You could use a bottle of beer in making atomic weapons. In fact, you do.
Leaving Strauss feeling humiliated. This incident further fueled his intense hatred for Oppenheimer. In 1949, the Soviet Union successfully developed an atomic bomb, thanks in part to a spy infiltrating the Manhattan Project, a spy handpicked by Oppenheimer himself for significant research work. Oppenheimer faced a political crisis as the FBI intensified investigations into his background. Despite the scrutiny, he continued opposing nuclear weapons research and advocated for diplomatic negotiations with the Soviet Union instead of engaging in an arms race. Edward Teller requested Oppenheimer to use his influence to suggest the continuation of hydrogen bomb research. However, Oppenheimer, consumed by guilt and remorse, refused. Tensions rose, and Teller harbored resentment, suspecting Oppenheimer feared that Teller's influence might surpass his own. The hydrogen bomb project proceeded under the leadership of the U.S. Air Force. Oppenheimer's consistent advocacy against nuclear weapons clashed with the interests of many high-ranking Air Force officials. His stance became an obstacle to their financial gains, as the development of the hydrogen bomb meant larger budgets and greater military expenditures. Amidst the escalating tensions of the Cold War between the United States and the Soviet Union, the U.S. adopted a fervent anti-communist stance, known as McCarthyism, marked by political persecution. Senator McCarthy and other right-wing representatives spearheaded relentless persecution against communists and progressive individuals. This political witch hunt extended to various fields, and prominent scientists like Oppenheimer became prime targets for censure. McCarthyism gained momentum, instigating a wave of political persecution. Strauss orchestrated a secret hearing to discuss Oppenheimer's loyalty to the nation, providing information from behind the scenes while maintaining a seemingly friendly relationship with Oppenheimer. Strauss did not directly participate but facilitated the process by providing evidence and encouraging individuals like Edward Teller, who harbored grievances against Oppenheimer, to testify against him. Strauss aimed not to eliminate Oppenheimer but to revoke his security clearance. Without security clearance, Oppenheimer would be barred from participating in national defense discussions, severely damaging his reputation. The secret hearing was a terrifying experience for Oppenheimer, where his entire life was dissected, from his leftist affiliations and associations with communist friends to clandestine affairs during the Manhattan Project and allegations of Soviet espionage. Oppenheimer faced exhaustive questioning about hindering the hydrogen bomb project post-World War II.
Arguments against dropping it, but I did not endorse them.
You mean after working night and day for 3 years building the bomb, you then argued against the use of it?
I was asked by the Secretary of War what the views of scientists were. I gave him the views against and the views for.
You supported the dropping of the atom bomb on Japan.
What do you mean
didn't
support?
You supported it.
What do you mean support?
Well, you helped pick the target, didn't you?
I did my job. I was not in a policy-making position at Los Alamos. I would have done anything I was asked to do.
Well, then you would have built the H-bomb too, wouldn't you?
I couldn't.
I didn't ask you that, Doctor! And the GAC report which you co-authored after the Soviet atomic test said a super bomb should never be built!
What I meant was... What I meant.
Who? And wouldn't the Russians do anything to increase their strength?
If we did it, they would have to do it. Our efforts would only fuel their efforts just as it had with the atomic bomb.
Just as it had with the atomic bomb, exactly!
Despite Oppenheimer's downfall, Strauss was quite pleased. He had finally brought down this hypocrite. Strauss staunchly believed that Oppenheimer's post-war opposition to nuclear weapons and his declarations of protecting all humanity were merely publicity stunts. According to Strauss, Oppenheimer's actions were designed to enhance his saintly image and, by dismantling Oppenheimer, Strauss had served the interests of powerful groups. A few years later, Strauss was nominated for the position of the U.S. Secretary of Commerce but narrowly missed the appointment by 3 votes. Those who voted against him remembered his actions against Oppenheimer, and they couldn't overlook his character. Reflecting on his past actions, Strauss berated Oppenheimer, accusing him of being cunning and manipulative. He believed that Oppenheimer had targeted him from their first meeting, spreading negative information to Einstein and instigating many scientists to oppose him. Others, however, tried to reason with Strauss, suggesting that it was possible Oppenheimer had more important matters to discuss during his first meeting with Einstein and that perhaps their conversation wasn't centered around Strauss.
Alvin, when I came to you with those calculations, we thought we might start a chain reaction that would destroy the entire world.
I remember it well. What of it?
I believe we did.